on energy, Professor Steve Thomas, who is an energy policy expert at the University of Greenwich Business School and formerly a member of the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex, just up the road from here. So, pleased to welcome Steve.
Thank you. I always thought LRC was London Rubber Company, but I promise that's the last attempt at humour. So, rather than go over the same ground as Charles and Brenda have done on fracking, I thought it would be more useful for me to try and put a bit of the energy context around it and talk about what actually is the problem, what are the priorities, and what options do we have. I think in terms of what the problem is, there seems to be two big problems. The first is that we seem to be running out of fossil fuels and they're getting very expensive. And the other problem seems to be that there is man-made climate change linked to fossil fuels. So fossil fuels seem to be the problem. We need to find some alternatives to that. What are the priorities? Well, I think if you read the media and the television and so on, I think you would believe that the priority is the electricity sector, where nearly all the talk is on, and competition, breaking up the big six, getting on to Go Compare and getting cheap price of electricity. I think those are wrong, and I think the priorities are actually the transport sector. Nobody really wants to talk about the transport sector because it involves people changing the way they live. Whereas with the electricity sector, you can just beat up the big six and say, be cleaner. So what can we do? I think going back to the transport sector, I think it's the largest element of our energy demand. It's 36% of the energy that we're using, and that percentage is rising. Finally, in absolute terms, it's beginning to come down because petrol has become so expensive that people are actually beginning to choose more fuel-efficient cars. But in terms of the energy mix, it's the sector that's really rising. If you look at industry, 20 years ago used to be 40% of our energy demand, it's down to 20% now. So in terms of what we've got to do, we need to get on top of the transport sector. And we need particularly to get on top of the air transport sector, which is probably only 4 or 5% of our energy demand, but that's growing really quickly. And that means getting to grips with the taxation issue of aviation fuel. That aviation fuel is very low taxed, so that means that your weekend flights to Prague are very cheap. You can certainly talk about hypocrisy because I'm flying to Hong Kong tonight, so that's a fair point. I think the second priority that we really need to think about is energy efficiency, and I'm bored of hearing myself say the best thing we can do is more energy efficiency. The second best thing is more energy efficiency. It's, and I hate the phrase, it's a win-win-win with energy efficiency. There is no environmental impact worth thinking about of energy efficiency measures. We are hugely inefficient in the way that we use our energy. Our housing stock is disgracefully poor. Our appliances are much less efficient than they should be. We can do a massive amount at very limited cost, and that will solve a social problem we would have to deal with anyway, that people cannot afford their energy. Something like 25% of households in Britain are now falling into the category of fuel poverty. And the only way to get out of that is to get them the same energy services they're having now, but using less energy. And that means they will be able to afford their energy bills, and that will prevent excess winter deaths, which I think after the last 2 winters we're going to find that the statistics will look very bad for people turning off their heating, turning off their electricity appliances when they need them. Turning then to nuclear power, and I suppose that's where I've done most prominent work in recent years. I've been working in the area for about 35 years, and I've never had to really get to grips with the very difficult issues of nuclear safety, waste disposal, proliferation, uranium mining, all these very difficult areas, because in simple terms, nuclear power is so expensive, I don't need to worry about it as an option. 35 years ago, it was expensive, and since then, it has got consistently more and more expensive in real terms. And in fact, over the whole 50, 60 years of the lifetime of the nuclear industry, the real cost has only gone upwards. What sort of technology is it that for 60 years goes up in price in real terms? How many people would be using mobile phones if they cost them 10,000 quid a year and were the size of a brick? I think you would be saying, this is really not the way to go. Yet there seems to be an infinite scope within politicians to believe that this time we're going to get it right. This time we have the right technology, the costs are going to start going down because of scale economies, learning, all the things that sound intuitively right but have never happened. And of course, if you think about Fukushima, then we haven't even begun to think about what the implications of that are. We don't have a post-Chernobyl design in operation yet. So Chernobyl, 1986, there is no design that takes the lessons of Chernobyl into account in operation yet. So we are 15, 20 years away from having designs that take account of Fukushima. So nuclear power is too expensive, and it's going to get more and more expensive. The problem with nuclear power is also that it's a very small part of our energy demand. Electricity is 20% of our energy, nuclear power is about 15% of that 20. So all this fuss is for just 2 or 3% of our energy demand. It's grossly disproportionate. If you look at the government effort and resources, expertise, money that goes into promoting nuclear power for such a small part of our energy needs. The R&D budget is probably still about 80 or 90% going to nuclear power. So nuclear power, I think, is a distraction. It's a huge distraction, and the sooner we take it off the table, the sooner we'll start to be putting resources in places where they can really make a difference. Carbon capture and storage, that's a sort of technical fix to make coal use acceptable. And the idea is that you can put something on a power station, grab the CO2, put it in a pipeline, stuff it into a hole in the North Sea, and hope it'll stay there, and so on. I mean, it's a concept that's been around for quite a long time, and I think maybe 8 or 10 years it's been seriously talked about, and I think in that time it's got significantly further away from being a realistic proposition. I think it's just simply another distraction that we should give up straight away, because it's never going to happen. So what about renewables? Well, the thing about renewables is that they are on a downward cost curve. Unlike nuclear power, the real cost is coming down. Onshore wind is very cheap already. Offshore wind is expensive, but we hope the costs are coming down. They should start to come down. Solar is very cheap, and in some climates it's probably the cheapest thing you can do. If you have a sunny, hot country where electricity demand is driven by air conditioning, then solar power is as cheap as you can get, because it happens when you need it most. So it's available when you need that energy. Not to say that we can't do it here. There are very good options for doing solar power here, and we need to be doing more about it. Biomass is a useful option, and in the longer term, there are options like tidal power, wave power, and third generation biofuels, ones that don't bring us into conflict with the use of land for food and for other uses of land. So there are options. I'm not saying they will happen. You can never be certain about R&D, but there are options for the future. What I would say is that all of these options, we are going to need at some point an effective storage technology. We will need, when we get to high levels of wind in our electricity mix, we will begin to need to be able to store that electricity more cheaply than we can now. So I think that's a priority, and that's not going to be easy to be done. I can remember the first oil crisis when Nixon's Project Independence was throwing huge amounts of money at battery technology, and it didn't work. So it's not going to be an easy nut to crack, but it's something that we have to do if we're serious about it. So I think the 2-minute sign is up, and I've already finished what I need to say. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Stephen, for providing a wider policy context for us. Before